Okay, so just a very brief introduction again into the topic of today. The topic of webinar is bridging gaps, advancing interest holders' values engagement in evaluation capacity building initiatives across Nigeria and the US. So the first thing is, I would like to let us know the purpose. Why are we here today? What's the reason for this kind of webinar? So the purpose of this webinar cuts across two areas. There's a knowledge piece and there's a practical piece. So the knowledge piece of it is the sharing of my dissertation research findings on how values, culture, and systemic factors of interest holders in Nigeria and in the US critically shape evaluation capacity building initiatives. And taking us further in the webinar is answering questions around whose values and what values influence evaluation capacity building efforts. How do power, equity, and systems factors influence the perspective of those people that will be elevated or excluded in the course of doing this evaluation capacity building work? And just like I said, the second piece will allow us to apply, to introduce and then apply the culturally responsive evaluation and systems theory framework, which is going to be a tool that will help us to examine and transform right here values engagement in evaluation capacity building in our work. So the agenda goes through the introduction, the problem statement. We're going to initiate a task, just like I said. This is an hands-on webinar. So please be ready to get your hands into work. Then I'm going to share again with you the framework, the methodology through which we were able to undertake the study, the findings from this doctoral dissertation that I did, and we are going to continue or complete, because some of you, you might not be able to complete that task that we're starting today. And for some of you, you might be able to complete the task. And at the end of it all, we'll wrap up. So, a little bit about myself. I'm a research and evaluation consultant with about a decade of experience in monitoring and evaluation in the sector of education, health, and developmental areas, both in Nigeria and in the US. So currently, I have a PhD in educational research measurement and evaluation from the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. And I also have a bachelor and master's degree in statistics from the Federal University of Technology, Akure, Nigeria. Over the course of the year, I've groomed myself to become an expert, in culturally responsive research and evaluation. I engage in mixed methods research. I work on evaluation capacity building, just like you see today, and not just evaluation capacity building, in also research capacity building, and also on different kind of professional development areas that we need in doing our work. I'm an advocate of systems theory. I'm also an advocate of data-informed policy analyst and a grant consultant. My work actually bridges different kind of context, whether in Africa or in North America. And my aim is always to advance equitable, inclusive, and sustainable evaluation practices by engaging not just experts, but all kinds of interest holders in the field. So I'm going to stop here. And again, I haven't talked about it all. Currently, I'm also the principal consultant of the MacDo Consulting LLC. MacDo Consulting LLC is actually a consulting firm that engages in research and evaluation consultancy, as well as professional development, whether in research, whether in evaluation, whether in management or administrative work. So at this point, I'm going to give it over to the moderator to also introduce herself. Janet, over to you.
All right, thank you. Like I said earlier on, and to those that are just joining us, I'm Janet Arogundade. I'm actually a doctoral student at University of North Carolina in Greensboro here in the United States. I have a master's degree in science education, and I've experience working as a teacher, as a researcher, and as a community development expert, where I work as monitoring and evaluation on different projects, from funding from NSF, USAID, Global Fund, and the like. And I have experience in capacity building, evaluation capacity building across diverse settings, both in Africa and also in North America. And my work is committed to culturally responsive evaluation practice, bridging, looking at context and then the culture of our participant, of people we work for. How do we ensure that we speak and we give them, that ground that actually look about their life experiences, and then to elevate diverse stakeholders' perspective, to give them a voice, to amplify the voice of the people we are working for, and also to strengthen sustainable change. So I envision a society where there is education, there is development, there is societal change in all its ramification. So that's a little about me. I will hand over back to the presenter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janet. That was so exhaustive. Thank you so much, even though you called it a little. Thank you for telling us about yourself. So now I go into the course of today. So what exactly is the problem on ground that led to this webinar coming up? As it is today, there's a kind of strong understanding or strong belief that evaluation culture, robust evaluation capacities are needed tools, crucial tools for that matter, to make effective decisions and transform programs that can actually advance progress towards the sustainable development goals. And as a result of this, because of this understanding, because of this current movement, there are lots of commitment and investment to evaluation capacity building all over the world. But the problem here is that the lack of equitable and inclusive stakeholder values engagement in these evaluation capacity building efforts, especially with the values of the funders taking precedence over every other interest holders, undermines the potential that people are supposed to harvest in evaluation capacity building. And as a result, it even impedes the sustainability of the effort by itself across diverse settings. So it's not just in Nigeria and in the US, all over the world. But today's study is focused on Nigeria and the US. Now, even after I've understood, even after I've shared why evaluation capacity building is now on the increase, why it is needed, you can still ask, so why then do we really need to conduct study on this? The first is this. It is essential to understand the engagement of whether local or foreign interest holders' values in evaluation capacity building in order to ensure the effective delivery of these efforts. But even as we are asking for more understanding, there are very rare studies that helps us to understand. what exactly are these values? Then how can we engage these values in an effective manner so that evaluation capacity building efforts in Nigeria and the US are transformative and sustainable at the same time? And as a result of this rare literature that could help us understand this issue is what encouraged and motivated this study in this area. And again, it has been very clear that evaluation capacity building, whether in Nigeria, most especially in Nigeria, hasn't really been grounded within our government structure and the public system in general. And all this boils down to the fact that their values are not represented in evaluation capacity building. So there's a need to indeed conduct an empirical studies to help us understand and address these issues. So very early in this webinar, I'm going to ask us to start a task immediately. So wherever you're joining, you can actually use handwritten, you can use handwritten table, or you can use your computer, your phone to draw out a table. But first, before you draw the table, these are the three ideas that are going to be represented in the table. First, think about yourself. Where do you work right now? Or think about the evaluation capacity building initiatives that you have been engaged in. What has it been like? What sector has it been? Or what kind of organization has that been? Do you want to write that down right now? And this table I'm talking about could just be 3 columns, maybe 3 columns and 5 rows. You can always increase the columns and the rows as we proceed in the webinar. And I'm giving us about 3 minutes to do that. 3 minutes to do that. So the second column the second column in that table will look into what primary and secondary interest holders. The first column is going to be about the sector you are focused on. The second column is going to be about the values of the people that you have been working with, whether it is their sectoral values or whether they are work values that has to do with evaluation capacity building. Why the third column is actually to help you itemize who exactly are these stakeholders. It doesn't have to be groups, it could be individual. So 3 minutes, 3 minutes. And we have just 2 minutes more now. One minute more. And at this point, I think the 3 minutes is okay for us now. Or do we need more extra minutes, extra seconds? Okay. In the absence of that, I'll move to the next slide. I assume that we have the table right now because we're going to work on the table all through the section. So this is my own table. You might be wondering that I have just 2 columns filled out. Yes. So my first column is up here. The reason is because I'm just thinking about one sector right now, which is the education sector. And I'm talking about one school district that I actually worked with. So, but this is not the name of the district though. So if you have like multiple sectors or multiple organizations that you work with, that could fit into a column. But because I have just one and I want it neat, that's why I just put the column. Instead of having the column here, I put it here. So now I identify different kind of values that my clients were always looking out for. So in this situation, I had different kind of interest holders as well. It doesn't have to be group, but this one just happened to be group. Some people work with individuals. So the first of that is the school district personnel. You have the superintendent and all of that in this category. We have the school administrators. Those are the ones that actually work in the school, where you have the school principal, the curriculum director, and all of those school leadership that work every day. They resume every day. Their offices are in the school premises. Then the school staff, the librarians, the counselors, sometimes even the school cleaners. Then the teachers, the students, parent, or caregivers. So it happened that maybe a proposal has just been put out and I just won the proposal. And this is my very first idea that I presented to win this proposal. I read this about this particular district, and this is what I understood about them. And this is what they have actually stated in the call for proposal, that this is what we need an evaluator to do for us. This is what we need an evaluation capacity builders to do for us. So for instance, the school district's personnel wanted an evaluation framework that will align with their policy goals. And they wanted a system whereby all the schools they oversee have an accountability structure. And not just the schools, even the programs, because there are lots of educational programs running in the schools that are being directed or managed by the school district personnel. So for the school administrators, they are actually looking for an opportunity where their leadership and their strategic planning operations are informed by data, not just by ideas that comes from nowhere. They also want to get consistent feedback about the performance of their school. And they also need some professional development as well, not just for themselves. They also want to be sure that they get feedback from the professional development that their teachers or other school personnel engaging. So for the school staff, the librarians and the counselor, their values, what they look out for, their aspirations, their priorities in this evaluation capacity building is actually to recognize the needs of their students, regardless of how diverse they are. They wanted an evaluation data that will help them to plan inclusive programs. They want an evaluation data that will improve the mental health services they offer to the students. The teachers on their own, they wanted an evaluation skill that will increase the effectiveness of their teaching. They wanted training and support for classroom level data use. They don't just want to be teaching without having a well structured data that will help them. Students want an inclusive decision making processes. They want an evaluation practices that will reflect their learning experiences and needs. So for the parents and caregivers, they wanted transparency and trust in school performance. They wanted evidence that their students, their children are receiving equitable treatment and they are progressing in their education. So for the two aspects, for the two columns left, we're going to leave it out for now and we come back to it later. So, but keep your eyes on that. And also keep your eyes on what you have written down because you might get some ideas as we go through this webinar that will inform you to where to maybe modify this framework that you have put down or maybe to just make it better into what you're looking out for. But please keep your eyes on what is going on in the webinar. And at the same time, let this framework, let this chart be in your heart because you might need to update it, modify it, remove some stuffs in it. But fingers crossed, we'll just proceed from here. So I told you the other time that this webinar is into two, the knowledge piece and the application piece. So this is the knowledge piece. This is my dissertation research. And what I used to undertake this study is actually a framework that is at the intersection of systems theory and culturally responsive evaluation theory. So the reason for systems theory in this situation is because systems theory oftentimes is complex and dynamic aware, is responsive to the fact that the context where we do evaluation capacity building is not static. Humans are not static. A lot of changes happen. And many of these changes, especially social changes, cannot be captured with scientific formula. We've got social constructs that will help us to not just understand, but to be able to profile solution. But again, you ask me, if systems theory is this useful, so why then do you bring in culturally responsive evaluation framework into your study? Well, I realized that oftentimes systems theory is not so human-centric. It's much more focused on systemic efficiency. Unlike culturally responsive evaluation that will help you to not just identify, but to be able to address relational issues that people face in evaluation capacity building. And like we have established from the beginning of this webinar, that the problem people face in evaluation capacity building, the problem limiting its sustainability and transformative power is because the values of people are not equitably engaged. So if we're going to be addressing equity to the root, we've got to take a step further beyond systems theory. Hence, allowing us to couple the two together in order to understand and profile solutions to the problems that we have. And this particular framework is transformative in nature because it prioritizes culturally responsiveness, community-based knowledge. It helps you to challenge those unfavorable status quo in our system and also challenge existing power dynamics that could be on the way to effective evaluation capacity building, while also ensuring systemic efficiency, because we also understand that evaluation capacity building is to help in effective decision making and transformative programming, meaning that the systemic efficiency of this work is highly important. So balancing the two together is what motivated this framework. I proceed. So to understand the study, I deployed a mixed methods approach. The qualitative piece was gathering interview and also open-ended survey responses. And they were analyzed using inductive approach. Inductive here was the thematic analysis that I followed. Why the deductive approach here was ensuring that every findings is in line with the culturally responsive and systems theory framework that I use. So ensuring that this study has a deeper and a comprehensive view of the problem. Then the quantitative methods survey data were collected, and some open-ended responses as well were collected, of which descriptive analysis were applied. At the same time, the deductive approach, because we needed to make sure too that the culturally responsive evaluation framework informs findings from the quantitative methods. And at the end of the day, the result from these two strands help to engage in better understanding of the problem. So that's the integrated phase of the study. Please, in case you have any question, you can chime in. It's okay. So who exactly are the participants that were in this study? So to start with, 15 people participated in the interview. And for the survey, about 125 people participated. But at the end of my data cleaning, I realized that 83 of those responses were useful for the analysis. So who exactly are these people who participated in this study? They are people who have been involved in the design or implementation of evaluation capacity building, whether directly or indirectly, in Nigeria and in the US. Some of them are members of professional bodies like the American Evaluation Association, the North Carolina Evaluation Network, the African Evaluation Association, AFRIA, the Nigerian Evaluators Network, and many of these associations as well are identified as members. And again, some of them were actually very active members of tropic interest groups of the American Evaluation Association. And beyond that, some of them are professors in various academic institutions here in the US, most especially, and even in Nigeria. And some of them as well were consultants doing their private businesses or working with international community. So telling you that this particular study actually engaged a broad spectrum of people, such that we're not just getting information from key informants, we're also getting information from people who even have minimal information about evaluation capacity building in order to balance the experiences of people for holistic understanding of the study. So now we want to talk about the findings. The first question is, what values drive ECB efforts in Nigeria and the US? What are my participants saying? Well, some of the values they have seen over the years driving evaluation capacity building efforts, especially from the US side. They saw the aspiration for community engagement, community development, community impact, meeting the needs of the community. That came up for them as the values interest holders look forward to when they tell people, come and do evaluation capacity building for me. People who identify with this kind of values in Nigeria were not that much. So please understand that low I that are used in measuring responses in this study doesn't mean that some values are less important. It only means that those are the number of people who actually saw this as a value in evaluation capacity building. So some people too, their aspiration for evaluation capacity building is because they wanted self-development. For instance, I could remember people in Nigeria saying that they wanted to know how to write grants. That was what motivated them. That was the values they were looking for, or that was the values that they had at the center of the evaluation capacity building they gave out to people. So this is not just people who were suppliers of evaluation capacity building. These were people too who were demanding for evaluation capacity building. But in the US, not many people saw it as a way to develop themselves individually. Also in Nigeria, a lot of people saw the values in evaluation capacity building in helping organizations to achieve their goals, in increasing the learning opportunity of organization, in meeting the capacity needs of organization. In Nigeria, this came up the more. In fact, some of them told me that evaluation capacity building in their organization was actually deployed to help them build their capacity to do qualitative study, to help them build their capacity to bid for projects, whether in the international space or local space. But a lot of people in the US actually attributed the values of ECB to what could help them to build their opportunity to meet their goals as an organization. For the values of interconnection among entities, Nigeria and the US seems to be at the mid level. For people in Nigeria, they saw evaluation capacity building as an opportunity to establish network, to build long-term partnership. But for people in the US, they saw it as a need for connectedness to the community, whether to the school community or whatever community they may be associating with. Also, in terms of accountability values, people in the US saw evaluation capacity building as promoting accountability values, impact. But for people in Nigeria, they saw less of that. People in Nigeria oftentimes quoted program efficiency as values interest holders look out for in ECB. Insights into working principles and systems. What do I mean by that? Many people value evaluation capacity building because it helped them to make a connection between the social world and scientific world. Many of them feel it gave them insight into how systems work. It gave them insight into how the job they do fits into the system of the organization. Then some people just feel, especially in the US, in terms of relational attributes now, more of them saw evaluation capacity building in that field, in that aspect, like helping people to meet equity goals, respect, and all of that. Whereas in Nigeria, many people saw evaluation capacity building values as increasing their optimism, helping them to be more hopeful that they can actually achieve their goals. And finally, many people, or not a lot of people in Nigeria and in the US, though the same way, saw the value of time, fund, employee as something they look out for in evaluation capacity building. So I'll just go to some of the quotes that the interviewees raised. So for Stephen, who is an ECB researcher, consultant, and professor of nonprofit management courses in the US, he saw that people aspired for evaluation capacity building because they needed their work to be delivered effectively, and some people see ECB as a way to address distorted mindset, because some people don't have a good mindset about evaluation capacity building. They just see evaluation as a way to, hunt after people. And to some people, they value their time. So he said, another value orientation is that they generally do care about their work, about the people that they are serving. And a third value orientation, I think, is the need to sometimes demystify or dispel any myths or misperception about evaluation. A lot of program staff see it as an administrative function. And I say, no, it's not. It's a program function. And let me tell you why. A lot of them say, well, that's only a concern for upper administration. No, it's not. It's a concern for frontline workers like you too, and they value their time. They don't want you to waste their time. You see? So, Oni, a lead monitoring evaluation with experience in educational sector and public service in Nigeria, think that evaluation capacity building in Nigeria is valued because it enhances organization learning, it helps them to gain insight into system operation, and it allows for accountability purposes. So it's stated. So when we started, what we were looking out for is how to deliver accountability. That was their purpose of doing ECB. Ensuring that funds are properly utilized, ensuring that people are being trained, that there is impact in the system. But as I enter it, I then came to understand. So he himself too was transformed, that aside from pursuing accountability, when you do monitor and evaluation, is also a veritable instrument for organization learning. You get a lot of insight. You get a lot of understanding of how system works and all of that. So now, just a little bit, I did a word cloud, gathering information from my survey participants. So in order to develop this word cloud, about 25 people responded in the US to the survey that produced this, and about 13 people responded in Nigeria. And I realized that in Nigeria, much of Nigeria focused on non-equity values much more than the US. What I mean by non-equity value, I mean contributory value. Like, oh, we want evaluation capacity building to tackle security threats. We want it to address environmental threats. We want it because it's going to enhance learning. We want it because it's going to alleviate, it has effect on alleviation of poverty. In the US, there were more people who saw equity as a value of ECB than Nigeria. About 86%, that's much. They wanted evaluation capacity to meet equity, empathy, respect, social justice, collaboration. But along the same line, both participants in Nigeria and in the US were on this average level of the same level of about 52% and 53%, saying that the reason why evaluation capacity is valued is because of the technicality it offers to them, like skills in impact assessment, data-informed decision, organization programs, authenticity, evaluation integration, and all of that. So this is just a way to help us to understand more and more what the people are saying about the values, the priorities, the needs they see evaluation capacity building meeting, or they aspire that it meets for them. So just a quick wrap of the integration of the findings from the survey and the interview. I realized that it is not just enough to keep stating that ECB values are contextual, dynamic, mindset driven, without identifying the typical values interest holders may hold in specific conditions. Because oftentimes, evaluators, when you ask them what are the values of evaluation, they will tell you, hey, it depends. It's contextual. Yes, it depends. Yes, it is contextual. But at the same time, we should have some basic understanding of what exactly these values are, instead of just keeping it open all the time. Because foundational knowledge of the values of this ECB, at least, would be a building block to getting more understanding, instead of just saying it is contextual, it is dynamic. Let's be more specific. Yes, it could change, but at least let's be more specific. And again, this study findings shows that recognizing even preliminary values can lay the groundwork for meaningful stakeholder engagement, especially where evaluation culture is weak or capacity is limited. You can imagine yourself, people who don't really know much about evaluation, you ask them, what are your values? Because if you don't tell me your values, I won't be able to design what will really meet your needs. Of course, they will be able to tell you their values, but you as an ECB expert, you should still be able to advise them on some areas, on some values that they might not see, that they may have a blind spot to. So that's the reason for the importance of this research. It is not just enough to keep quoting the word contextual, dynamic, mindset driven. Let's be specific, especially for the case of population who have weak evaluation knowledge or capacity to even design in the first place what values will help them to achieve their goal in evaluation. I proceed. So, whose values drive ECB efforts? I've talked extensively about the desires, the aspirations. I've talked extensively about all of that. But the question now is, whose values have we been seeing coming up in evaluation capacity building? Whose values? Whose values? Whose values? So it says, the fundants of the values of fundants, for instance, in both Nigeria and the US, whether international or external, funders play a key role in ECB. In fact, they significantly shape the values that guide this effort. Whose values again shape this effort? Organization leaders in both countries. Individuals in top managerial positions shape the values of ECB. In fact, in Nigeria, most people who participate in ECB are top officials, but the sad thing is, who does the work? It's not always the top officials only, but those who have the opportunity to do the ECB are oftentimes the top officials. But when the real work comes, the lower cadre who didn't do the ECB will be pushed to do the work. Which values again shape ECB? Those of experts, especially in the US. People with high expertise in evaluation or ECB, they dominate how ECB is also shaped. They also have greater autonomy to share value. Sometimes some of them told me, yes, I understand that the funders didn't want this, but I needed to allow some of these things to happen. So sometimes they ensure that these values are shared broadly instead of just serving the interest of funders. They have more autonomy in the US than in the Nigeria setting. Then some influential groups also shape ECB values. People of certain class, age, profession. For instance, if you belong to a professional body, whether, for instance, the American Evaluation Association, was it not a couple of days I was being introduced or I was being invited to participate in um, the 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 framework? So I was just asking myself, oh, this is an opportunity to shape the values that are being prioritized in evaluation. And why am I given that opportunity? Because I belong to the professional organization. Then in Nigeria as well, people who are much more advanced in age are much respected to shape ECB values other than people who are younger. Even when the decision is on people who are younger, older people are much more appreciated than the young people who are impacted to give their room, to give their opinion about the values they want in ECB. Then leaders in community and government. In Nigeria, most especially, community leaders, government officials, and security agents emerge as key actors driving local buy-in and successful delivery of ECB initiatives. If we don't carry these people along, it is possible that ECB in Nigeria will fail if you do not engage the values of the community leaders, the government officials, and security agencies. So, what inference am I drawing? Was I able to draw? Again, it is a costly assumption to presume that the primary contact in an ECB context is aware of all relevant interest holders who should be included in the initiative. We just did a task where we itemized interest holders that we may have worked with. But in some situations, there are ECB that have left out relevant groups. Why? Because the person in charge of the evaluation capacity building design and implementation assumed that the people employing them to do the work already know who should be involved. But that is not always the truth in most cases. Sometimes people that we work with need our expertise to be able to make correct decisions on who should participate in this initiative. Then I say it, the responsibility still lies with ECB experts to collaborate with others and actively facilitate the engagement of all relevant interest holders to promote inclusiveness. If we don't act, some things will be swept under without paying attention to them. And these are people who really matter in this ECB effort to become sustainable indeed. So the last of the question is, how do power, equity, and systems influence whose perspectives are elevated or excluded in ECB. I'm just going to be talking here about some of the quotes that the interviewees provided. This person said, external funding requirements constrain beneficiary-centered ECB in the US. Mercy, an ECB expert who has experience in non-profit, universities, government agencies within the USA, I see a lot with programs is that there are always funding requirements. And so sometimes those feel like they overpower the values or needs or desires of the population that's been set. So sometimes the funding requirements is a barrier to effective engagement of interest holders. I think that a lot of the agencies that I work with find ways to do both approaches. So figuring out ways to do so, I think about with one of the projects I work on around domestic violence prevention. We have things we have to report. It is a CDC project. So we have things we have to report to the CDC. And we do those things, but it doesn't stop us from gathering the data that the community and the agency is actually interested in. You can imagine the funding requirements even became a barrier to the agency themselves doing the work. But thanks to this ECB expert who was able to at least ensure that values are shared. Another one said, conventional leadership norms limit participation of young peoples and individuals with disabilities in Nigeria. Taye, an MIE consultant of more than 30 years experience from Nigeria, says, based on our traditional code of conduct and our perception of disability, will a king allow someone who is living with disability sit in his council to inform his rulership? He will likely not. Some councils are progressive, they will pull a youth leader, but many will not. So we still have to do more in terms of changing that structure, that system, and also allowing that newness of things that have happened over the years to affect us. Now, there's a call for younger person to be in leadership. And why is that? Because young people do not have to wait until they are old before they do so. And again, the traditional structure is changing. But the only thing is that the code of conduct has not changed so much because we believe that knowledge resides in age. So the structure of Nigeria by itself does not really encourage people with disability, young people, to meaningfully participate in ECB. And yet we want this thing to be sustainable. We claim that our children are our tomorrow, and yet the tomorrow are left out of what we help them to be a better future. You see the dynamics of ECB. It's so relatable. I proceed. Organization leaders, another factor that influence values elevated or excluded in ECB. Organization leaders' resistance and evaluators of advocacy shape client values engagement in ECB processes in the US. So we see here again, organization leaders push back. Stephen, an ECB researcher, a consultant, and a professor of nonprofit management courses in the US said, I fought back on him. Even though he's the executive director, he's paying me. I said the parent must be there. So he finally caved in, and we had two parents present at each of the 4 logic model development sessions. Parents were engaged, they participated, they gave us pearls of wisdom, and in the end, he was overjoyed that the parents were there, and the parents felt flattered and honored being asked to come to the section. You see here, the organization leader could have succeeded in not allowing these parents to contribute in ECB. But thanks to the ECB experts who advocated, who didn't even think that his payment could be jeopardized, his job could be lost. And eventually, when it yielded positive results, the executive director was overjoyed. Not just the parents only, even the executive director. He was overjoyed. And the parent too. The sense of importance that comes from local ownership of ECB cannot be equalized with anything else that we can think about. We're talking about sustainable and transformative ECB, then there's an advocate for them in this situation, an ECB expert, who ensure that these people were indeed included. Then again, what inference am I drawing from the findings on how power, equity, and systems shape interest holders' engagement? Beyond simply acknowledging the importance of equitable and inclusive ECB, scholars and practitioners must actively work to address existing power dynamics and challenge harmful status quo. We shouldn't just be saying, yeah, it is good. Ensuring equitable and inclusive ECB is good. But when we do the work, let us do the work. As scholars and practitioners of ECB, it is our duty to allow values to be shared among all relevant interest holders in the ECB initiatives that we participate in, that we supervise, that we facilitate. Additionally, interest holders across their various roles needs to be meaningfully equipped and supported in the engagement process, as this is essential for achieving transformative and sustainable ECB. You just heard what that interviewee said. He said the parent felt valued. Now, is it possible for that same parent to hear about evaluation in the future and not want it to continue? Of course, does such a parent to be very happy to allow it. And also the organizational leaders, having seen the impact of parental involvement in ECB, how it helped his work, I'm sure another time he will be much more open to engage more diverse population or groups in ECB. Finally, we are going back to the work we started. We're going back. How can the culturally responsive system framework be used to examine and transform interest holders' engagement in ECB? You see, for me, when I started this research, the culturally responsive and systems theory helped me a lot to see what I couldn't have seen. And it's also helped me a lot to think ahead of how issues confronting ECB could be resolved. And that is what I want to pass on to you this afternoon as the benefits you also gain alongside the knowledge that you can apply in your work. So please go back to the table. For some of you that are just joining us, when we started this webinar, we had a very short table. You can still draw the table. I'll give you the opportunity to draw the table. But before that, let me give you a very good insight into what exactly is this culturally responsive evaluation and system theory framework that I'm talking about. So this particular framework that you see displayed before you is actually an original work from my dissertation. So oftentimes, social framework are ambiguous, so to say, in applying directly to research. So when you talk about culturally responsive evaluation and systems theory framework, when you see them most times being used or being talked about, being discussed in literature, you ask yourself, how do you break this framework down to become useful and applicable in your context? So that was what motivated the breakdown of this framework into these 9 dimensions you see displayed before you. So the very first of it is the centrality focused. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So the centrality focused piece or dimension of the creed actually highlights the different hierarchy that we may have, whether it's in the community that we are doing the ECB or is in organization. It helps us to understand how they are interconnected in their operations. And it also helps us to understand the position of leaders in the organization, whether they are in supportive of ECB or they are not. Another dimension that I looked out for as I was in my literature review, in my data analysis, that I looked out for and also helped me to see more than I could have seen if I didn't use this framework, was the holistic context dimension. So this piece is actually helping one's mindset to be much engaging of diverse interest holders. So regardless of their realities, it helps you to see not just political context. You're also able to see the historical context of these people. You're also able to understand their economic situation. Because ECB, when it's not holistic enough, then you can easily miss out areas that people actually should bring in into ECB or people that should be brought in. You don't just look at the people in the organization. It helps you to also look beyond the organization. How are your clients doing? How can we bring them in? What can we do to make sure that we help you to satisfy better your clients? What can we do to make sure that your goals in this organization is not antagonistic to what the organizational environment deserves? Another area is the strength-based design piece. So the truth is this: relationships and resources can never be balanced. It is not, you can never have all the time you want. You can never have all the funds you want. You can never be liked by everybody. Those are facts. You can't change anything about that. But you can still bring out something out of that limited fund, out of that limited time. You can still be productive. Out of those relationships that are not really balanced, you can still make out something. That is what the strength-based design is talking about. And it's also talking about you leveraging on opportunities. Don't just look at your participants as people who don't know, they don't know anything about ECB. No, you shouldn't say that. You should be able to engage with your participant to understand their existing knowledge, their position in ECB, their cultural assets, their strengths, and knowing that you are able to select and manage what you have. Another aspect of that dimension is the multifaceted perspective, right? So that helps you to integrate substantial and methodological elements rooted in a multidisciplinary knowledge base. And it will help you to challenge biases. You are not just one-sided. You should be able to diversify and look into other perspectives that helps the ECB to work or that has been affecting it, not allowing it to work. The goal setting and diverse outcomes. You should be able to recognize that oftentimes there are several ways that can lead to a goal. But of the several ways that can help you to meet your goal as an evaluation capacity builder, there's still an optimal path that you can still navigate your way through within the limited resources that you have and ensuring that all stakeholders are engaged. The information processing and communication helps you to understand what is communication role in the decisions of these people that you're working with. Should you ensure redundancy? Should you teach them more and more a particular area so that they are better? Or should you just gloss over some aspect? It helps you. How much should you communicate these findings? Is this findings a finding that you should just shout about? Is this a finding that you should tell parents of, or you should not tell parents of? Even if you tell parents about these findings, is there a way you can write it so you don't destroy things that shouldn't be destroyed? The operational mechanism, yes, that one has to do with the both and not. We're talking about ECB, right? That's where we talk about the framework. What framework do you want to use? Is the empowerment framework? Is it collaborative framework? Is it partnership framework? Do you just want to involve them in logic modeling? Do you want to just involve them in the design of theory of change? Do you just want to build a path model with them? This is where you have to discuss those pieces. And even in all of this, you also have to understand the internal operations of the organization. How is it affecting how people behave? How is it affecting their performance as an organization? They want their performance to spike up. What frameworks, what strategies can you introduce to optimize their performance, even in a changing environment or with clients whose needs are changing? Especially for organizations that are providing services, they tend to have customers whose needs oftentimes are dynamic, or the context by itself is dynamic, right? Change of political climate can lead to a lot of changes in organization. Evaluation capacity building is contextual, is responsive to the context, to the culture of the people, their political climate, their socioeconomic status, their history. All of these things are needed. Then, the viability perspective. I've been talking so much about sustainability. Viability perspective actually prioritizes more of that, ensuring that there's sustained existence, there's consistency. It wants a very effective feedback system, continuous information flow, adaptability. It encourages that, just to make sure that this evaluation capacity building is sustainable. It's not something that, what differentiates evaluation capacity building sometimes from one-time evaluation is our opportunity to continuously have it in the routine practices of the organization or the community you are trying to impact. Then the last of it is the role of ECB practitioners. Honestly, our roles as ECB, whether scholars or practitioners, is key in ECB. We are not just agents of systemic efficiency, we are also agents of social change and justice. We are also able to help the people to share power, to ensure transparency, inclusive and emancipatory knowledge, not just trying to make sure that the people are restricted. This is our duty. And I said it the other time, we should graduate from the realm of acknowledgement to the realm of activeness in doing our work. Now, I want to go back to that task, work to do. For those of you just joining me, please, what we started with is this. I told every one of us to reflect. Who are the people you work with when you say you want to do evaluation capacity building? Or who are the people you have been working with? Or peradventure, just like in my own case, a call for proposal has just been released. That, oh, please, they are looking for a particular ECB practitioner or scholar or a particular consultancy firm to design ECB for this organization. And when a call for proposal is being announced, there is a need for you to at least have a preliminary plan to present to the people. It is how reasonable your plan is that makes you have an edge over other competitors. So I said, in this situation now, please, whether you use hand or you use your computer, please have before you 5 different columns. The first column, you write the organization or the field, whether it's the field of education or whether it is a food company. Then the second column is you're going to write what are the values. For instance, I'm responding to a call for proposal or I'm bidding for an award to win an ECB that is to improve the capacity of people in the education sector. What are the values of those people? I thought about it. In the proposal, they would have written it because they will write it in proposal what they want you to achieve. That we want an evaluation capacity building that will help our school administrators to do this, and that. That will help our teachers to use data-informed practices in enhancing the performance of students. Those are the values. Then the third is, oh, you have stated all what they want. You need to look closer or you need to think deeper about who you have worked with. Who are these people? Some of us, we work with groups of people. Maybe some groups are teachers, some groups are um, some groups are nurses, some groups are head of department, some groups are community members, some groups are parents, some groups are mothers for some of us that work in the health sector. And some of us too is individual. Maybe in food co-industry, you are working with Mrs. James, and in Fadeco Health Agency, you are working with Dr. Noel, write it. Then the fourth column is your review. You now want to carry a review out with the CREST framework. You want to use the CREST framework to help you to understand who have you left out? Who exactly should be in this that is not there? What possible values could be missed out? How can you, at this point, how can you engage the people to make sure that this ECB is effective? Because you know that when you do this training for these people, when you do this ECB for these people, they are going to do evaluation assessment. They are going to do evaluation of your work. You know that. So you don't want to do any bad job. So that's the reason for this CREST framework. You want to ensure that you meet the target. What you deliver to the people is actually effective. You want to make sure that is done. And the fifth column, which is the last column, is you now generate ideas. Okay, now that I know, I've known who I'm involving, I know what they want, I know this, I know that. Okay, so what do I do? How do I engage them? So I'm giving us just 2 minutes, and we'll move to the to the to the to the piece. Yes, just 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes. After 2 minutes, we'll proceed. The reason for this class or webinar exercise is actually to help us translate what we are gaining, not just to attend the webinar for attendance sake, but to be able to ensure that we are applying knowledge gained. And for some of us to, if you want me to share the framework with you, feel free to reach out to me. I'll share my contact after. So you can reach out to me and just say, oh, please, just give me that framework. Or, yeah, just explain to me one thing or the other that you may have. And yeah, 1 minute more.
Yeah, somebody already requested if the slide will be shared or the recording. So maybe after the webinar. Yeah.
We're almost there. All right, so I just proceed from here. Okay, so now this is what I started with. I didn't complete it, but I'm going to complete it because I really need to meet my client's need. So already we filled out this. We filled out the first column and the second column. That we already filled out, right? So the aspect that I'm now looking out to is the review and the value. No, so now this is how I was able to generate the ideas in the review notes. So if you remember, We might be going back and forth if we want to, if we need to. But if you remember, I displayed out to us a framework that has 9 dimensions. So one thing that came to my mind is this. When I talked about the centrality dimension, which was the first dimension, I mentioned that it helps one to review and profile solution to areas around leadership and how leaders they are connected in hierarchy, or sometimes it also helps us to understand and profile solution that has to do with whether it is different organization. For this situation now, this school district has many schools because I'm working actually with the educational sector of the US. So a school district could have 10 to 15, maybe K through 12 schools. So that's what I'm working with. And in the call for proposal, they have told me that this is what we want to be done. Even if in some cases they might not put school district, because oftentimes if it's the school district that is putting out the call for proposal, oftentimes here in the US, with my experience, they might not include themselves as someone you want to also engage in evaluation capacity building. But the culturally responsive evaluation and systems theory framework has taught me a lesson that if I really want this thing to succeed, then I have to carry along the school district personnel. Why? These people are looking for, look at their value, alignment of evaluation framework with policy goals. Can you deal with policy without involving leaders? No. So the centrality frameworks helps me to see that. So immediately I get a work to do, evaluation capacity building, and I'm asked to plan. Like, okay, this is the money we have. Plan with this money, right? I'm able to see, okay, there's a need to involve this school district personnel because we are looking for an evaluation framework that will align well with the policy goals. And sometimes some policy goals are not perfect too. They might be limited. There might be a need to say, okay, this is what the policy says. Is this allowed? Because policy change oftentimes don't happen quick, right? But you can also work around the existing policy if what you're asked to do is just maybe 3 months training, 3 month evaluation capacity building. You don't work on policy change in such situation. But you could profile some solution that could be acceptable with that policy, within the policy requirement. So in that situation, you want to engage these people. So now, I first of all do my review. So this is my line of thought. This is how I work. You might have another line of thought, but this is how I work. I first of all try to understand the review area. Okay. Again, they are looking for accountability for results across schools and programs. We are still dealing with centrality dimension because there are so many schools, and you want to ensure that even a school that is a magnet school, right? You are in the same district with another school that is probably serving a population that they are maybe socioeconomic lower. And oftentimes in schools that are of lower socioeconomic status, there are possibilities of that school not performing so well as a magnet school would. So these are the factors you have to put into place and understand. So that when you are sharing your findings and they're like, what happened? Hey, how can this, you'll be able to put in some context into what you're doing. And also, it will also help you to understand better how to approach teachers. Because here you are going to include teachers in this work. It will inform your understanding of this is how you are going to engage these teachers. This is what these teachers need. This is what a teacher in magnet school may need, which a teacher in maybe a lower socioeconomic status, maybe L1 or L2, may not need. So that aside, then they talked about evaluation framework. If you look at that CRE-ST framework, I talked about the operational mechanism where I said here you have to talk about the the real boat or not? What are these strategies and framework you're going to use? Are you going to use training? Are you going to use coaching? Are you going to use peer learning? Are you going to use there are several things you're going to use, right? So those are the places you talk about it. Then let me move to the next one. School administrators, they are still leaders, only that this kind of school administrators leadership, they work within the school district can have their own office outside of the school premises, but the school administrators of course have their offices every day where they resume into the school. That's where we have the school principal, the assistant school principal, the curriculum director. All of those people, they have their offices well stated in the school, so they also belong to the centrality. You also be able to understand as well how much are they in support of evaluation. What is their mentality about how evaluation will help them? They said they want a data-informed leadership and strategic planning. So because they talked about strategic planning, right, that's what made me to talk about goal setting dimension. Because in that goal setting, it helped you to understand this is the goal you are trying to achieve, but there are several ways you could achieve them. But you have to pick an optimal way where which you are able to spend less, right? You're able to spend less, and at the same time, people agree to it that it's going to help them. It's not going to be harmful, it's going to be productive. And of course, the operational aspect of it as well. You're going to help the people to understand how they can use data, how they can use basic analysis. You don't have to teach them complex analysis. Co-administrators have to be using R. You deal with them based on their level of understanding. Then I'm going to skip all that. I'm going to just jump to the parent and caregivers. These people, all what they value in ECB is they want an evaluation that will help them to understand how much the school is giving their students treatment, how much their children are able to progress, right? They also want transparency and trust in the school performance. Like they want to be very clear. They want to understand, even if some of them are not educated, right? Because parents can be diverse. You have some that are very educated and some that are not so educated. Whether they are educated or not educated, as an ECB or as an evaluation capacity building scholar or practitioner, you should be able to factor in how you will communicate with these parents, regardless of their level of education, to understand how their children are being treated, how their children are progressing academically. They have to be able to understand, especially when you are serving a very diverse population. Some of them don't even understand the English you are communicating, yet you still have to make sure they understand what you're saying. And all of this boil down to two major areas in that dimension. I talked about the ECB, the role of the ECBs, right? The role of the facilitator of the evaluation capacity, and the role of communication and information in this setting. Those are the two areas. Now, when you think about that, after you have already thought through, so this is what also will help you to use the framework better. Like, I can't be thinking of all the 9 framework, all the 9 dimension for every um stakeholder. So what I do is this: immediately I see school district personnel, I know a particular framework or a particular dimension of the 9 that emphasizes more of it. So all those dimensions as well, they are not disjoint, they are overlapping. It's just that one emphasizes one area than the other. So having done that, you have carefully reviewed with the CRE, is able to help you to understand. And don't forget the holistic context too, though I didn't write it here, it will help you to understand, especially in the context of Nigeria, where truly you are doing evaluation capacity building in the Ministry of Health. But sometimes, if you don't include some people, whether in the government sector that may even be in another department or in the community, you know what? All that your training, you have just wasted your time because they're not going to allow it to work. You don't have to get those people away as well. You have to look for a way to ensure that They are included. You just have to determine how much they are engaged. So that's the reason why the holistic context too has to be involved. Whenever you are just doing ECB, just think about that holistic context. Even these people you are working with, what's their history about evaluation? I've had so many of my interviews and survey respondents telling me, oh, evaluation to these people is like you're coming to hunt them. It's like it's just, oh, when they hear about evaluation like this, they are scared. They don't want to hear. Even if you are teaching them, they are not really down with you because they feel you are going to pursue them. So there's a way to address every context that you are addressing. And that's the reason why you have to be very, very critical as you think about the dimension. So the last of it, the values, engagements, ideas. So like for the school administrators, I said, well, you have to co-design, work with these people, whether you use meeting, whether you use one-on-one conversation to ensure that not just your own idea comes to the adaptation or the design of the framework. The idea has to be there. And you share brief comparison to support evidence-based choices. Oftentimes leaders don't have time to read. But when you give them, this is what will happen with a graph, this is what should have happened, they understand better. And they are able to have your findings in their heart rather than just push it aside. For the school administrators, you provide them strategy sections that they can use. You provide them feedbacks dashboard. Today, there are so many dashboards that you can use. Some of them are real life, maybe the Tableau, or or there are so many. Some of them does not even have to be electronic, right? But for this kind of school administrators, of course, they will be very good. They will be very used to digital world. Then engage them in peer learning opportunities to guide their decision. Finally, I'll talk about the parents. Share findings with them in a clear way. They belong to different kind of class in terms of their education. Give them visual format of things. Let them see. Host meeting with them. Engage in multiple languages. If they don't understand English, speak to them in the language that they understand, and they'll be able to remember you for what you did for them. So finally, you have succeeded in building the framework of your training. Now you transfer it. You are giving this work June, July, August, 3 months. June, July, August, September, 4 months. So distribute it. So what I did is this. First, all interest holders, you have to engage them to put them on the same page with you. That's the first step. Then I think, to me, the school district personnel has to start because it's what you design that you want to implement in the schools before you then engage the school administrators and the parents or caregivers. So, for instance, for the interest holders, you conduct consultations with them. Or already I say you could develop and validate the objective, especially with teachers. You allow them to have their input in it as well. It is not just only the school administrators that will decide. That is why you are a ECB, right? I talked about the ability to share values. You're not just listening to one particular group because they hired you. These are the people that paid my money, so I only hear them. No, you have to also engage all those teachers that are working in the school so that what you do with the school administrator will be applicable to them in their own context, right? So for the school administrators, I think that they have to also be engaged in the co-design, with the district leaders in order to get this evaluation framework adopted. Then I have to engage them early as well to get their buy-in. Then finally, for the school administrators, you know, they want data-informed decision and strategic planning. So do as much as possible to provide them with that opportunity to learn how to use their school data to inform their decision. Simple analysis can help them. It doesn't have to be complex. You provide them with dashboards as well to monitor and see real life what is happening in their school. Then you promote peer learning. Peer learning is a great way, less expensive. You can do peer learning without having to pay any money, and people gain from that. And for the parent, you host meetings with them. You provide them reports in different formats, storytelling, visuals, to help them understand their children performance. And how they are being treated in an equitable way in the school. And don't forget, please, adapt this to your own context. This is my own response to a proposal request. So, but you can even share with me as well if you've done it and ask me, what do you feel about this? And I'll tell you my opinion. I'll review it and give you a very good constructive feedback. So, finally, having some precursive ideas can serve us as a starting point. I talked about it that evaluators oftentimes are fond of is contextual, is dynamic, is mindset. They shy away from placing some specificity in things, which oftentimes might not be a good way, especially when you are working with people that do not really have much knowledge about evaluation. But even as good as preconceived idea is, in the case of ECB, you could do a pre-assessment. Even as good as all of these things is, you still have to ensure a substantial collaboration with the interest holders within your target context. And finally, I shared with you that CREST framework. Honestly, I cannot tell you all how it helped me to see beyond what I could have discovered if I hadn't used it. It helped me to uncover a lot of things that scores of literatures are not able to find while I was doing my dissertation research. It helped me to uncover and explore areas of engagement that might otherwise be overlooked. Meaning that it is very supportive of developing sustainable and transformative ECB initiatives. The world we have today, we are looking for something that will impact us, that will change us. And if there's anything that will help you to do an ECB that is truly life-changing, I think the CREST framework is a good way to go. So I draw the curtain from here. As I ask you, I first appreciate you again for starting with me this far and to this point. And please feel free, share feedback you may have, questions, or any discussion you may have right now or later on with those contacts that I've displayed on the screen. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate you. I'm just going to keep quiet here in case you want to say anything. Please feel free.
Okay, Wesley, please go ahead. You have a question? The floor is
Yes,
open.
thank you so much, Omodolapo. This is Mustafa Ismaila from Nigeria.
Thank you so much.
It's very insightful listening to you walking us through these slides. Particularly, the webinar has been very engaging. And I must also thank you for your willingness to share with us the key insights from your research and your practical experience for the ECB engagement consultancy proposal development. It's very, very helpful and insightful. Personally, I've learned a lot from this. I just want to ask a question.
Okay.
It has to do with the data analysis coming back from the field, the qualitative analysis in particular. You shared a slide that shows how the analysis is done based on thematic analysis methodology. So I just want to ask, those teams, were they predefined before the kickstart of the analysis, or were they informed based on the data collected from the field? Just to learn about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ishmael. I do appreciate your consistent support and for coming to this webinar. Thank you so much. That's a great question. So those themes actually originated from the data without any a priori theoretical underpinning. So it originated from the data. So it's actually inductive, right? So I allow the data to speak by itself. So it was until those themes were generated, then I now went ahead to do the deductive analysis. So of course, I didn't show the deductive analysis findings. So it's not necessarily like a finding like that. I just use it as a classification. So each of those dimensions that I've made mention, those 9 CREST dimension. So what I did was, for instance, areas where I was talking about um like people were aspiring for community impact, or people were aspiring for um community engagement and all of that, or people were aspiring for connectedness, especially in the US, they were looking for opportunity to connect more to the community. I would classify that. If I were to classify it, I may classify it under holistic context. Because oftentimes, if you are working with an organization, you are working with a school, you may decide not to connect with an external community. But if you want to be much more holistic, you want to consider the parent. So the teams were inductively generated from the data. Then the deductive aspect of it was when I brought in the CREST framework to help me see more beyond what I could have seen and to also classify. If that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. This is very explicit.
Thank you so much, sir. I appreciate it. Okay. I believe we can end it here.
If I may
In
go
the
again,
absence
sorry, I would like to humbly request for the slide, if
Okay.
that can be shared with us.
Of course, why not?
Okay, thank you.
Can you drop your email address in the chat?
Yes, we'll do that right away.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ishmael. We do appreciate. All right. So I believe we can draw the curtain from here as we call it a day. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I do appreciate you. Thank you, my moderator, Janet Arobundade. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, my participants, both those that ended with us and those that couldn't make it to the end because they had a very optional engagement somewhere else. Thank you so much. I do appreciate you. God bless you.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.
Bye, thank you. Okay, can you stop recording?